They said justice was blind, but Nia Carter had learned long ago that injustice could see perfectly fine. It saw the color of your skin. It saw the tremble in your hands when you tried to sound confident. It saw your exhaustion, your fear, your silence, and it fed on it. At 35, Nia had become an expert at swallowing storms before they reached her throat. She worked 2 jobs, took care of her teenage nephew, and lived in a neighborhood where sirens replaced lullabies. But she carried herself with the controlled grace of someone who didn't have the luxury of falling apart. It was 7:12 p.m. when she walked into the community center for her shift, the air thick with the smell of floor polish and microwave noodles. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead like tired eyelids. Kids ran across the hall, barefoot, loud, unbothered, while the older teens leaned against walls with practiced boredom, pretending nothing in the world could touch them. Nia signed her name on the shift sheet, her handwriting sharp and precise. Sarah Williams, the center's youth coordinator, leaned over the reception desk with a stack of files. A petite black woman in her early 20s, Sarah carried hope the way other people carried backpacks, visible, heavy, and impossible to ignore. "You look tired," Sarah said, holding out a coffee cup. "I am tired," Nia replied softly. "But I'm here." Sarah smiled warmly. "That's why the kids trust you." Nia didn't say what she was thinking. That trust was heavy too. Just as she set the coffee down, the main door slammed open. Marcus Rodriguez walked in, wearing his usual swagger like a tailored suit. His dark coat hung open, revealing a crisp button-up shirt that didn't match the late-night chaos around them. His eyes scanned the room, sharp and calculating. "Evening, ladies," he said, voice smooth like lacquered wood. To anyone else he seemed charismatic. To Nia, he was a man who always spoke like he already knew the ending to a story you hadn't finished telling. Sarah straightened. "Hey Marcus. You're early." Board meeting ran short. His gaze slid to Nia. "You're covering the tutoring section tonight?" "Yes," she answered, keeping her tone even. "Good. Kids listen to you more than the rest." A compliment that somehow never felt like one. Before either woman could respond, one of the teens, Dre, a lanky 15-year-old with a backpack that always seemed too heavy, rushed toward them. "Ms. Nia," he gasped. "They're arguing again." Nia set her coffee aside and followed him to the computer room, where raised voices spilled through the doorway. Inside, Clayton Patterson III stood with his hands planted on a table. He wore a tailored navy suit, the kind that whispered generational wealth and polished entitlement. His wife hovered near the door, uncomfortable, while their daughter pretended to scroll on her phone. "This is unacceptable," Patterson snapped, pointing to the computer screen. "You expect my daughter to learn in these conditions? This equipment is ancient." Nia stepped forward. "Mr. Patterson, what's the problem?" He didn't look at her when he answered. "The problem is competence. Or lack thereof." Nia's spine straightened. Sarah rushed in behind them. "Mr. Patterson, these computers were updated last year. If something isn't working, we can fix." "Don't interrupt me." His tone cut across the room like a blade. Nia saw Sarah's face fall, but she stepped between them before the sting settled. "Sir, talk to me," she said. Finally, Patterson's eyes met hers, cold, irritated, dismissive. "My daughter entered the wrong login 3 times. Now she's locked out. How is that not your fault?" Nia exhaled slowly. "Because that's how security systems work." His lips thinned. "Are you calling me ignorant?" "No," she replied calmly. "I'm explaining how." He raised his voice, sharp and accusing. "People like you always have excuses." The room went still. "People like you." The phrase hummed through Nia like electricity. She forced herself to breathe, to stay steady, to stay Nia and not the anger pulsing behind her ribs. Before she could respond, Marcus appeared, as if summoned by tension. "Mr. Patterson," he said warmly, "I heard there was a concern." Patterson immediately launched into a story, one soaked in exaggeration, bending truth into something unrecognizable. He painted himself as disrespected, painted Nia as unprofessional, painted Sarah as negligent. Marcus listened, nodding sympathetically, occasionally giving Nia a look that wasn't disappointment. No, something worse. Dismissal wrapped in authority. When Patterson finished, he crossed his arms triumphantly. "I donate 5 figures a year to this center," he said loudly. "I shouldn't have to deal with incompetence." Marcus clasped his hands behind his back. "Of course not, sir. Thank you for your generosity." Then he turned to Nia. "Nia, apologize to Mr. Patterson." Her breath caught. "Marcus," Sarah whispered, horrified. "She didn't?" Marcus raised a hand. "This is about preserving relationships with our funders." Nia felt dozens of eyes watching. Kids, teens, staff. She had spent years teaching them about dignity, self-respect, boundaries. Now she was being asked to swallow all of hers in a single sentence. Apologize, Marcus repeated louder this time. The kids looked afraid. Patterson looked satisfied. Sarah looked devastated. Nia's throat tightened. She forced out the words with a steady voice. I apologize for any misunderstanding. Patterson leaned back, smug. Maybe she'll learn how to behave. The venom in that sentence lingered long after the family walked out. Marcus waited only 10 minutes before calling Nia into his office. The room was cramped, smelling of old binders and lemon cleaner. Papers were stacked high along the walls, and a single flickering lamp cast long shadows across Marcus's desk. He didn't offer her a seat. Nia, we need to review your performance tonight. My performance was fine, she said quietly. Mr. Patterson escalated the situation. Marcus sighed deeply, a practiced sigh, the kind meant to sound like concern. You cost the center money. Donor relationships matter. I can't ignore that. He pulled out her schedule and a red pen. Her stomach dropped. I'm reducing your hours from 40 to 28. You'll be moved off evening programs. Sarah will take lead tutoring. You'll handle admin shifts. Nia stared at him. That's a pay cut. That's a consequence, he replied. Her pulse hammered in her temples. Marcus, I support my nephew. I can't. You should have thought about that before tonight. He made another red mark. Also, a $30 uniform penalty. Your shirt had lint on it. Nia felt something inside her crack, not loudly, not visibly, but deeply. She inhaled, exhaled, spoke softly. That's not fair. Marcus didn't look up. Fair has nothing to do with it. And that was the moment Nia understood something with terrifying clarity. If injustice could see, it was looking right at her. And it wasn't done yet. Nia didn't cry when she left Marcus's office. She didn't even let herself breathe too deeply, afraid that if her chest rose too high, the grief inside it would spill out in a way she couldn't control. Instead, she walked through the dim hallway of the community center with the steady steps of someone who had learned long ago how to hold pain without letting it crush her. The building was quiet now, emptied of the noise that usually filled its walls like an echo of life. The overhead lights hummed softly, flickering in tired pulses. A janitor pushed a mop bucket across the far end of the hallway, the wheels squeaking against the tile. Somewhere in the distance, a vending machine rattled as if clearing its throat. When Nia reached the front desk, Sarah was still there, pacing in small circles with her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She looked up the moment Nia approached, her eyes wide and searching. What happened? Sarah asked, voice trembling slightly. He called you in so fast. I know that look on his face. What did he say? Nia placed her tote bag on the countertop and kept her voice even. He cut my hours. Sarah blinked. He what? 14 hours gone. No evening shifts. No tutoring. Administrative duties only. Sarah's mouth fell open. That's your entire paycheck. That's not a correction, Nia. That's punishment. It's retaliation, Nia said softly. And he knows I can't refuse. Sarah let out a frustrated breath, pacing again. Marcus shouldn't even be allowed to make changes like that without committee approval. He's supposed to run decisions like this through Linda, but he acts like the board gave him full control. Nia watched her, touched by her outrage but too exhausted to feed her own. I can fight this, Sarah said suddenly. I'll talk to Linda. I'll talk to Henry. Oh. No, Nia interrupted gently. If you challenge Marcus, he'll make you a target too. But you didn't do anything wrong, Sarah insisted, her voice breaking slightly. You handled Patterson better than anyone else in that room would have. You stayed professional. You stayed calm. He humiliated you and you still kept your dignity. Nia forced a tired smile. Dignity doesn't pay rent. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Sarah's face crumpled. Nia? We'll figure it out, Nia said, picking up her bag. We always do. But Sarah reached out, grabbing her hand with surprising strength. Whatever Marcus is doing, she whispered, it's getting worse. Nia felt a cold ripple run through her. What do you mean? Sarah glanced around the lobby, checking for lingering staff, then lowered her voice. He's been moving hours around for months. It started with Robert in maintenance. Then Denise in the after-school program. Quiet changes, little cuts, a few dollars here and there. Everyone thought it was budget tightening, but after tonight I'm not so sure. Nia frowned, a knot tightening in her stomach. Budget cuts don't come with uniform fines, she murmured. And they don't come with humiliation, Sarah added. Patterson walked out like he owned us. He does, Nia replied bitterly. At least that's how Marcus treats him. Before Sarah could respond, the entrance door opened and a gust of cold night air swept into the lobby. Marcus himself stepped out of the administrative wing, clipboard in hand, acting as if the harshness from earlier had evaporated. Evening, he said smoothly. Nia, don't forget to review the new guidelines for staff attire. I'll email them tonight. She nodded without speaking. Sarah's jaw tensed. Marcus cutting her hours was unnecessary. He looked at Sarah with a controlled smile, the kind that never reached the eyes. Necessary is subjective when you're responsible for operational stability. You could have talked to her privately first, Sarah pressed, voice trembling with anger she was trying to tame. You could have reviewed the cameras or listened to her side. Her side, Marcus repeated. Sarah, I appreciate your concern, but this isn't your decision. It concerns all of us, Sarah fired back. You're punishing staff for things they didn't do. Marcus's smile deepened in a way that wasn't a smile at all. Be careful, Sarah, he said softly. You're a bright young woman. I would hate to see your potential overshadowed by unnecessary involvement. Nia stepped between them before the tension grew sharp enough to cut. That's enough, she said quietly. Let's all go home. Marcus gave a satisfied nod, as if he'd orchestrated the entire scene for his own amusement. Good night, ladies. He left through the back doors, coat swaying behind him like a shadow stretching too far. When he was gone, Sarah let out a breath she'd been holding too long. He's changing, she whispered. Or maybe he was always like this and we're just seeing it now. Nia didn't answer. The question lingered in the air like dust unsettled. They walked out together into the quiet night. The parking lot was covered in patches of dim, uneven light cast by old street lamps. The sound of distant traffic hummed like restless thoughts. When Nia reached her car, Sarah squeezed her arm. You're not alone, she said firmly. I mean that. Nia placed her hand over Sarah's, grateful in a way she couldn't say out loud. Get home safe, Nia murmured. You too. When Sarah drove away, Nia stood there for a moment, letting the cool night soothe the heat under her skin. She looked up at the sky, where city lights blurred the stars into smudges. She felt the weight of everything pressing down: rent, reduced hours, her nephew waiting at home, the humiliation she had swallowed whole. But something else grew beneath the heaviness. Something sharp. Something alive. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was a knowing, quiet but powerful, that what happened tonight wasn't an isolated crack. It was the beginning of something deeper, something structural, something darker. And once cracks began to show, the whole foundation eventually came into view. She got into her car, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking lot. The road ahead stretched long and uncertain, the yellow street lines blurring beneath the tires. As she drove, she replayed Patterson's words. Marcus's tone. The red pen. The hours slashed without hesitation. Punishments disguised as policies. Silence disguised as survival. Nia didn't know how yet, but she could feel it. This was not the end of something. It was the beginning. And beginnings always revealed what had been growing in silence. Nia woke the next morning with a kind of heaviness that pressed against her ribs like a second heartbeat. She lay still for a moment, staring at the faint cracks in her bedroom ceiling as the early light seeped softly through the curtains. The quiet inside her apartment had a brittle edge to it, the kind of silence that didn't offer peace but instead reminded her of everything waiting for her as soon as she stepped outside. From the living room, she heard the muffled hum of the refrigerator and the soft squeak of Ezra's chair as he moved around, probably trying to fix a toy that had fallen apart overnight. Her nephew was gentle, almost too gentle for a world like this, and sometimes she felt protective in ways that scared her with their intensity. Nia? Ezra called. Auntie, are you awake? She sat up, forcing her voice into something steady. I'm up, sweetheart. Give me 2 minutes. She dressed quietly, pulling on a dark blouse and slacks, the kind Marcus never complained about, though she now wondered if there had ever been a day he wasn't quietly judging her. She tied her hair into a low, neat bun, checking her reflection in the bathroom mirror. Her face looked tired but composed, the kind of face that belonged to a woman who carried too many responsibilities and still somehow planned to carry all of them again tomorrow. In the kitchen, Ezra sat at the small table with a bowl of cereal, kicking his feet lightly beneath the chair. His smile brightened the room. You're working tonight? He asked between bites. Not tonight, she said, avoiding how her stomach twisted. Just daytime office hours for now. That means we can start the science project tonight? Nia hesitated, thinking of the hours she'd need to make up somehow, the calls she'd need to take, the budgeting she'd need to redo. But she smiled. Yes, baby. We can start tonight. The way his face lit up made the bruise of last night's humiliation feel a little softer. She walked him to the bus stop, holding his hand in the crisp morning air while the neighborhood stirred awake. Lawn sprinklers whispered across uneven grass. A dog barked in the distance. Two neighbors stood by their cars, discussing gas prices and pretending not to notice the struggles written under each other's eyes. At the stop sign, Ezra hugged her tightly. You'll have a good day, he said simply because he believed saying so made it true. She kissed the top of his head. I'll try. When the bus pulled away, she stood there for a moment longer, letting the rumble fade. Then she took a deep breath and headed toward her car, knowing the real weight of the day was only just beginning. The community center looked different in daylight, though not in a comforting way. The walls, once painted in cheerful blues and greens, had faded into colors that looked tired. A small crack spidered through one of the front windows, something Marcus had promised to fix months ago but never actually addressed. Inside, the building felt colder than usual. Staff moved around quietly, their voices low, their steps cautious. Nia noticed it immediately, the atmosphere had shifted. Conversations stopped the moment someone approached. People glanced behind them before speaking, as if the walls had developed ears overnight. Because they had. Or rather, everyone now realized Marcus had been listening for a long time. She headed to her small office, passing the break room. Sarah stood near the coffee machine, clutching a paper cup and staring blankly into the middle distance. Her shoulders were stiff, eyes tired in a way that looked new. You okay? Nia asked softly. Sarah blinked and forced a smile. Didn't sleep much. Because of last night? Because of what last night showed me, Sarah replied, her voice quiet. He's crossing lines, Nia. Lines that aren't supposed to be crossed without consequences. Nia stepped closer. What happened after I left? Sarah hesitated before answering. He sent an email at 2 a.m. Nia felt her chest tighten. About what? He's implementing new performance evaluations, Sarah said as she handed over her phone. Monthly, individual, and subjective. Nia scanned the screen, the words burning themselves into her mind. Effective immediately, staff performance will be assessed using the new merit-based system. Attendance, attitude, customer interactions, attire, and demeanor will factor into scheduling and continued employment. Attire, demeanor, attitude. The same vague tools he'd used against her. Now expanded to everyone. This isn't a performance system, Nia whispered. It's a weapon. Sarah nodded, looking sick. He's documenting excuses to cut hours. Or worse. A heaviness settled between them as the truth grew larger in the room. Marcus wasn't tightening operations. Marcus wasn't adjusting budgets. Marcus was building power. And everyone who challenged him was now in the line of fire. Before Nia could respond, Marcus stepped into the break room doorway, his smile polite and sharp. Good morning, he said, pretending not to notice how they both tensed. Team meeting in 10. Attendance is mandatory. He walked away without waiting for a reply. Sarah's jaw clenched. He's enjoying this. Nia didn't disagree. The meeting room filled slowly, chairs scraping against the floor as staff members took their seats. Denise from after school sat with her hands clasped tightly. Robert leaned forward as if bracing himself. Everyone looked unsettled. Marcus entered with a clipboard and a smooth expression of authority. Thank you for coming, he began. As you know, we've had several incidents recently involving customer complaints, staff performance issues, and confusion around chain of command. Nia's stomach twisted. Chain of command. A phrase that always hid something worse. Marcus continued, to maintain the credibility of our center, I will be making necessary adjustments. He pulled out several sheets of paper and the room collectively held its breath. Effective immediately, he said, all scheduling concerns, grievances, and departmental decisions must go through me. No exceptions. Sarah's eyes snapped toward Nia. He was cutting staff off from leadership. Centralizing everything. Removing oversight. Marcus's gaze moved around the room like a slow scan. I expect full cooperation, he continued. And remember, refusal to follow protocols will affect future scheduling. A threat wrapped in professional language. When the meeting ended, people didn't rush out. They lingered, whispering in small groups, confusion and fear etched into their expressions. Robert approached Nia first. He touched my maintenance hours again, he said quietly. And now he's making me sign a new form. What form? Something about accountability for supply usage. Like I'm stealing bleach. Nia closed her eyes for a moment. Then Denise walked up. He cut 3 of my after-school days. Says parent feedback wasn't strong enough. No parent said anything to me. One by one, staff approached. Each story sounded familiar in its cruelty. Each reflected a pattern. A pattern that led straight back to Marcus. Nia felt something shifting inside her. A slow, steady awakening of purpose that spread through her chest like a rising flame. Sarah, she said softly after the last staff member walked away. This isn't isolated. This isn't random. No, Sarah whispered. It's a system. And systems can be exposed. Sarah looked at her for a long moment. Are you sure you want to be the one to do it? She asked. Because once this starts, there's no going back. Nia looked toward Marcus's closed office door, her reflection faintly visible in the small glass pane. A reflection of a woman who had been underestimated, humiliated, and punished for simply doing her job with integrity. I don't want to be the one, Nia said honestly. But someone has to be. And for the first time since the previous night, she felt the smallest spark of something close to hope. Not because the fight would be easy, but because she finally saw it clearly. Marcus wasn't the storm. He was the first crack in the dam. And once a crack formed, pressure always found a way through. The morning of the hearing dawned with a cold clarity that seeped into Nia's bones long before she stepped out of her apartment. She had barely slept, not from fear, but from the quiet certainty that something irreversible would happen today. The air outside carried the stillness that comes before a heavy storm, and as she locked her door, she paused long enough to feel her heart beating with both courage and exhaustion. Ezra shuffled into the hallway behind her, rubbing his eyes and wearing mismatched socks he insisted were lucky. He tugged gently on the sleeve of her coat. Auntie, he said softly, do you have to go? She crouched to his height, smoothing down the collar of his tiny jacket. Yes, baby. I have to go handle something important. He nodded with a seriousness beyond his age. Is it because of the man who yells at you at work? Nia drew in a slow breath. Children always saw more than adults admitted. She pulled him close, inhaling the familiar scent of cocoa butter and school glue. It's because someone has to make sure things get better, she murmured. And today that someone is me. Ezra wrapped his arms around her neck. You'll win. The simplicity of his confidence weakened her knees. She kissed the top of his head, then watched him climb onto the bus with the other children, offering one last wave before disappearing behind tinted glass. She stood there for a moment, letting the early light wash over her face. This was no longer just about workplace retaliation or discrimination. It was about the kind of environment her nephew would grow up in, the kind of world he would inherit. She had been stepped on, silenced, and dismissed, but not destroyed. Today would determine whether her voice shattered the glass Marcus had built around himself, or whether the system he manipulated would swallow her whole. She chose to fight. She got into her car, gripping the steering wheel with steady hands, and drove toward the community center with a resolve she hadn't felt in weeks. Inside the center, tension clung to the air like thick fog. Staff gathered in tight clusters, whispering in voices that danced between fear and hope. Robert stood near the maintenance closet, holding a clipboard with trembling hands. Denise paced near the reception desk, her anxiety visible in every movement. Sarah approached from the hallway, her steps brisk but her eyes heavy. She carried a folder filled with documents, testimonies, screenshots, timestamps, logs of hours cut, written threats that Marcus thought sounded polite, and denial responses that only made his guilt more evident. Are you ready? Sarah asked quietly. As ready as I can be, Nia replied. He knows you filed, Sarah whispered. He spent the morning walking around like he owns the city. He always walks like that. Yes. But this time he's sweating through his collar. The way Sarah said it almost made Nia smile. Almost. A door slammed down the hallway, and Marcus emerged with a stack of papers and a practiced expression that balanced on the edge of condescension and authority. His tie was too tight and his jaw clenched with the effort of pretending he was unbothered. Nia, he said stiffly. A word before the board arrives. No, she said evenly. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. For weeks he had spoken over her, around her, through her, but never directly to the part of her that refused to shrink. Today she let that part speak. We can talk in the hearing, she added. He hesitated, then forced a cordial smile that strained the muscles in his face. Very well. If you think that's wise. She did not respond. She simply turned and walked toward the conference room with Sarah at her side. Inside, the long wooden table gleamed beneath fluorescent lights. 3 board members sat at one end, reviewing paperwork with the measured calm of people who had seen too many complaints but rarely ones that brought half a building trembling in anticipation. The room smelled faintly of lemon sanitizer and old carpet. A single clock ticked loudly on the wall, marking each moment with a slow inevitability. Nia took her seat, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. Marcus sat across from her. He adjusted his tie 3 times before the meeting even began. The board chair, Ms. Holloway, a woman with silver hair and tired eyes, cleared her throat. We are here to address formal allegations filed by staff member Nia Daniels regarding misconduct and abuse of authority by center manager Marcus Hale. We also have corroboration from multiple employees. Ms. Daniels, you may begin. Nia inhaled deeply. She spoke clearly, not with rage but with conviction. She told them about the progressive retaliation, the verbal digs disguised as feedback, the scheduling penalties handed out for fabricated infractions, the public humiliation during the community event, the weeks of silent punishment masked as procedure. She described the new merit-based system, designed not to evaluate but to threaten. She explained the culture of fear that had grown inside the center, one paper cut wound at a time. She did not embellish. She did not exaggerate. She told the truth. Sarah was next. Her voice shook only once when she spoke about the email Marcus sent at 2 a.m, an email dripping with intention. Then Robert. Then Denise. Then 3 part-time staff members who had never raised their voices publicly before, all stepping forward with small but damning details. A missing hour here, a fabricated complaint there, moments that formed a mosaic of calculated abuse. Each testimony chipped away at the glossy image Marcus had built around himself. By the time he spoke, his confidence had thinned. Marcus leaned forward, attempting to reclaim the room with the tone of a man who had regained control in countless previous situations. These accusations are exaggerated, he began smoothly. Some are outright false. I am enforcing policy as I have been trained to do. Ms. Holloway lifted a page. Is it policy to implement undocumented evaluation systems without board approval? Marcus paused. I was testing internal improvements. And is it policy, she continued, to cut the hours of staff without notice or written justification? I only made adjustments necessary for budget. The budget did not change, she said sharply. According to our records, you deliberately misreported scheduling needs. A ripple moved through the room. Marcus swallowed. And this email, she said, lifting the page higher, sent at 2 a.m, informing staff that attire and demeanor would now determine their job security, was that also for the budget? Marcus stiffened. Professionalism matters. Nia spoke before the board could respond. Professionalism is not a weapon. The words hung in the room like suspended thunder. Ms. Holloway finally set the papers down. We have reviewed enough. The room fell silent. Even the clock seemed to stop ticking. The board members huddled together, whispering intensely, their faces tightening then loosening in rapid shifts. Marcus stared at them as if the force of his glare might bend their decision. 5 minutes passed. Then 6. Then 7. When they lifted their heads, the room held its breath. Ms. Holloway spoke with calm finality. Based on the documentation, testimony, and pattern of misconduct, we are terminating Marcus Hale effective immediately. A gasp broke from somewhere near the door. Marcus stood abruptly, his face drained of color. You can't. We can, Ms. Holloway said firmly. And we will. Security will escort you while you collect your things. This facility cannot continue under your leadership. For a moment, Marcus looked at Nia with something like disbelief, as if he could not fathom that the person he had tried so hard to belittle had dismantled him piece by piece. He opened his mouth, but whatever words he meant to deliver dissolved before they reached the air. He was done. When the door clicked shut behind him, the entire room breathed again. Sarah wiped a tear quietly. Robert's shoulders fell with relief. Denise covered her mouth, whispering a thank you under her breath. Nia remained still. It wasn't triumph she felt. It was release. A weight she had carried alone for too long now lifted, replaced by a soft certainty that she had not just survived something, she had changed something. By the following week, the center felt different. Doors that once stayed shut were propped open. Conversations flowed freely. Staff no longer glanced over their shoulders before speaking. People smiled, not out of obligation but out of genuine ease. Sarah was appointed interim manager, a decision staff welcomed with applause. One of her first acts was reinstating hours, reversing punitive changes, and implementing transparent procedures written collaboratively with the team. The community noticed almost immediately. Parents complimented the warmth in the after-school program. Seniors attending morning classes commented on how the energy felt renewed. Teen volunteers returned without needing to be coaxed. Hope had a way of changing the color of a building. One afternoon, Nia stood near the reception desk, watching Ezra complete his homework at a corner table while munching on crackers. He waved when he saw her looking. She waved back. Sarah approached, her clipboard tucked under her arm. "We're hosting a staff appreciation lunch Friday," she said. "You better be there." "I wouldn't miss it," Nia replied. Sarah hesitated before adding, "You did something most people never do. You challenged a system that was hurting all of us. And you won." Nia looked around the lively lobby, the laughter, the movement, the sense of shared purpose returning like a long-absent friend. "I didn't win alone," she said. "Nobody ever does." Sarah nodded, her eyes softening with gratitude. "Still, you lit the match." Ezra tugged on Nia's sleeve. His eyes shone with earnest curiosity. "Auntie, did everything go better today?" Nia smiled, bending to kiss his forehead. "Yes, baby. Everything went better." And for the first time in a long time she meant every word. When she stepped outside into the late afternoon sun, the world around her felt open again. Not perfect, not magical, but possible. The breeze carried the scent of fresh pavement and blooming jasmine. Cars passed one by one, parents picked up their children, and somewhere nearby, someone played soft music from an apartment window. Life continued. But now it continued with fairness carved into its stones. Nia knew that justice was rarely a loud explosion. Sometimes it was a series of small doors opening after years of being locked. Sometimes it was a single meeting that shifted the ground beneath everyone's feet. And sometimes it was simply the courage of one person saying, "Enough." She had said it. Others had echoed. And the walls fell. If you're still watching this and you've ever been silenced, overlooked, or mistreated in a place that depended on your labor but never respected it, this story is your reminder that change begins the moment you decide you deserve better. If Nia's journey moved you, if it made you think, if it sparked even one question you want to explore, please share your thoughts in the comments, because that is how conversations grow into movements. And if you want more powerful stories like this, stories rooted in truth, justice, and resilience, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs the reminder that their voice matters. Thank you for watching. And remember, silence protects no one, but your truth can change everything.